Welcome back, everyone. Let's dive into a question that came up recently. How do you prepare for tough conversations, especially when they involve confrontation or navigating tricky communication in a shared workspace? One listener, Eric, who's a supervisor at a wood and metal shop at a university, shared some insight into his struggles. He says, "How do you communicate the importance of cleanliness, tool safety, and maintaining order in the shop without coming off as rude or worse, the bad guy?" That's a solid question, right? Now, I've never actually run a shop myself, but it seems like Eric's facing a common issue, having to enforce rules and expectations while maintaining a positive environment. There are definitely ways to make those conversations less confrontational, but before I share any advice, I'd love to hear from you, the listeners. If you've run a university shop or have experience managing shared spaces, drop your thoughts in the comments. What's worked for you? Let's take a step back though, because Eric's situation is unique. He's dealing with university students. Now, here's an interesting thing I've learned recently. Adolescence, the developmental stage we usually associate with teenagers, actually doesn't end in the late teens or early 20s like we once thought. It stretches all the way into the late 20s. Yes, scientifically speaking, it's true. During that period, the brain is still going through something called myelination, which is a process that strengthens the brain's connections and can last well into your late 20s. So, when you're working with university students, you've got a pretty wide range of maturity and emotional awareness. Some might still be figuring themselves out, while others are already ready to conquer the world. That's got to be tough for Eric, who's trying to manage different personalities all in the same space. For anyone who's been in a similar role, what's your strategy for communicating with such a diverse group? And by the way, speaking of university workshops, I once toured an incredible makerspace at Case Western University in Cleveland. It's called ThinkBox. It's a 7-story makerspace, and I gotta say, it's a game changer. If you're ever in Cleveland, it's definitely worth checking out. Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about another listener question. Gwendolyn, thank you for the correction in your message. She mentioned that her wife is a poet, and she asked, has observing her process and reading her work changed how you communicate or how you create? The answer? Yes, absolutely. When you're an artist and you're working alongside another artist, there's a unique level of understanding that doesn't always require words. You just get it. For me, it's been amazing being with someone who shares that creative space, especially in a marriage where we both respect the unpredictability of the creative process. The kind of mutual respect really fosters a space for vulnerability and growth. Having been with my wife for over 20 years now, I've come to realize that this creative connection allows us both to be more gentle with each other. We give each other the space we need, especially during those moments when you don't quite know where a project is headed. As for how observing her process has changed how I communicate, well, it's taught me the power of patience and trust in the creative journey. You don't always have to have everything figured out from the start. Sometimes just allowing things to unfold is the best way to go. Now, let's turn to another question from Chuck. He asked, how do you prepare for and handle difficult conversations? Great question, Chuck. We've all been there, right? Those tough moments when you have to say something you don't want to, or worse, when someone else is confronting you with something difficult. At one point in my early career, I worked for a company called George Coates Performance Works. We took a show called Nowhere Now here to Japan. The experience was eye-opening because, despite the language barrier, our crew spoke no Japanese and the Japanese crew spoke no English. We had to communicate and collaborate to make it all come together. And you know what? We made it work. We had no choice but to find common ground and focus on the goal. But what happens when you're in a conversation where there's literally no common ground? No chance of understanding? My advice: get out of that conversation. If the conversation isn't going to help you move forward in any way, it's time to walk away. There's no point in pushing through if it's just going to leave everyone frustrated. So, when you find yourself in a difficult conversation, ask yourself, what's the purpose of this? Is it to resolve something or to make progress? If the answer is no, then it might be best to step back and regroup. Sometimes, silence is the best response. All right, so how do you prepare for those difficult conversations? Well, a little preparation goes a long way. Know what you want to say, stay calm, and don't let emotions drive the conversation. The goal isn't to win the conversation, but to have a constructive exchange that leads to better understanding. So, listeners, how do you handle tough conversations? What's the hardest conversation you've had to navigate? And what did you learn from it? How to prepare for confrontation. All right, let's dive into something that's always tough but important: confrontation. A lot of us avoid it, right? But in my experience, confrontation is actually an investment. And here's what I mean by that. If you're a friend of mine and I take the time to tell you that something you did upset me, I'm not just complaining. I'm telling you that I'm choosing to invest in our relationship. Because, let's be real, if I didn't care about you or the relationship, I wouldn't bother. I just walk away and let things go. But when I bring it up, it's because I believe the relationship is worth working through. I've been in situations where I've had to confront someone about something that really bothered me. Like one time I told a friend, "You really pissed me off when you hit on my friend last night, especially since she's in a relationship." I didn't want to be harsh, but it had to be said. And this friend, instead of acknowledging how it might have made things awkward, told me, "I'm just trying to make new friends." Complete lie, right to my face. At that point, I knew where things stood. I made the effort to clear the air, but they just refused to acknowledge the problem. So I moved on. No hard feelings, just a clear understanding that it wasn't the relationship I thought it was. That's the thing about confrontation. It's about the willingness to change the dynamic. But sometimes it's hard to know when to speak up, especially when emotions are involved. So, over the years, I've learned to pause and think before confronting someone. If there's something I need to say to someone, I'll usually take some time to reflect on what I want to communicate. I think about the conversation, what I want to get across, and how best to say it. And then I wait for the right moment. Maybe when they bring up a similar topic or when they're asking for advice. That's when I know they're ready to hear me out. Now, let me tell you a funny story about a difficult conversation I had years ago. This one really sticks with me. I was working with someone in a professional setting who was making my life as difficult as possible. They weren't reading my emails. I needed them to go through a set of facts I was presenting, but they just weren't engaging. I was so frustrated. Here's the thing I always do when I need to send a tough email. I write it without putting their name in the subject line. It's like my safety rule. Don't put their name in the header and don't add their email address until you're 100% sure you want to send it. It's like giving yourself a chance to cool down before hitting send. So, I write all my thoughts out, just unloading everything that was bothering me. Then comes the editing phase. I pull out all the emotional stuff, know you language, just I feel statements. It's all about making it clear that it's my perspective, not an attack. But before I sent it off, I thought, I'm not sure this is right. Maybe I need some feedback. So I decided to send it to my partner, Julia. At the top of the email, I wrote, "Julia, let me know if you think this letter is too emotional. I'm trying to find a right balance here." And, of course, I accidentally sent it to the very person I was frustrated with. And guess what? It worked like a charm. They thought they were reading an unfiltered version of my thoughts, so they actually read everything I wrote. One of the best accidental moves I've ever made. Sometimes, the best way to handle a difficult situation is to make the other person feel like they're getting the raw version of your thoughts. So, here's the takeaway. If you're in a situation where someone's upset you, but it's not a relationship you care about, don't bother confronting them. What's the point? You're probably not going to be heard, and honestly, it won't change anything. But if the relationship is important to you, then think of confrontation as an investment. You're trying to build a future where there's more understanding between you. It's not about winning the conversation. It's about moving the relationship forward. Every meaningful friendship I've had has been shaped by some kind of confrontation. It's just part of the process. You can't expect to have only good times with people. You're going to have your ups and downs. The hard conversations are just as important as the good times because they help define how much you care about each other. So, when you're thinking about confronting someone, ask yourself, is this relationship worth the investment? If it is, then go ahead and speak your truth, but do it in a way that fosters growth, not just venting. Before I wrap up, I want to touch on something else that might help you in communication, especially in environments like a shared workshop. Whether it's a wood shop, a metal shop, or any kind of collaborative space, printed rules and guidelines can be a real game changer. Sometimes having something physical that everyone can reference helps make those tough conversations easier. All right, that's all for today. Remember, confrontation doesn't have to be a battle. It could be a bridge to a stronger connection as long as you approach it with the right mindset. Thanks for listening, and as always, feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with me. Until next time, shop rules and the importance of setting boundaries. All right, let's talk about something that's essential for every workspace. Shop rules. It's not just about me being the bad guy or coming down on you with a bunch of restrictions. The truth is, rules in shop are there for a reason. They're there to keep everyone safe, keep the place running smoothly, and ensure that things stay in good shape for the next person who needs to use the equipment. Let me take you back to my very first experience working in a theater shop up at the College of Marin. There was this one shop rule that I'll never forget. Someone had this piece of plywood that ended up getting dragged across the table saw. The saw grabbed it, spun it, sliced right through it, and then shot it across the room, straight into the wall. Yeah, pretty wild. So instead of just replacing the plywood and moving on, they took it out of the wall, hung it up on the wall above the table saw, and wrote a note on it. Mr. T, table saw does not like being handled roughly. That's one way to make a point, right? It was a clear reminder that when you're working with dangerous equipment, you've got to show it respect. And that sign, hanging right there in front of you, really helped set the right mindset. Every time you stepped up to that table saw, you were reminded of the lesson, loud and clear. Then, fast forward a bit to my time working at the original Colossal Picture Model shop. This was with Jamie Hinman and a cat who used to run the shop. They had a specialized table saw blade for cutting acrylic, a Plexiglas blade. Now, every shop has its own set of tools and blades. You've got your regular table saw blade, but then you also have blades for specific materials, like D blades, carbon blades, triple chip zero clearance blades, and so on. But that Plexiglas blade, you only want to use it for acrylic. And when you're not using it, you need to take it off and put it back in its proper storage. Well, to make sure people remembered, Kat, who ran the shop, wrote a little note on the blade itself. It said, "Hey, Weasel Wart, don't just leave this on the table saw. Take it off and put it back in a box when you're done." Not exactly the friendliest message, but you know what? It got the point across. That's the thing about shop rules. They can be direct and even a little funny, but they're important. And that reminds me of something Tom Sachs once shared, his famous 10 bullets from his workshop. These are rules that were originally just floating around in his shop, but one of his assistants codified them into a list of 10 solid principles. It's a perfect example of how every workshop has its own version of these guiding rules, the ones that really matter to keep things functioning smoothly. If I were to come up with my own 10 bullets for my shop, some of them would be obvious but important, like put your tools away for the next person because they were there when you arrived, and wouldn't that be nice if you found everything in its place? I've got to say, I've been fortunate to have a shop that I mostly use on my own, which means I don't have to worry too much about things getting messy or equipment being out of place. But when someone does come to use it, like John Duncan, who came by yesterday to use the table saw, I feel this deep sense of gratitude. It's nice to share that space, and I appreciate when people treat it with the same respect. Before I wrap up, I just want to share something that's been really important to me lately. I'm also looking for real friends, and if you've been enjoying these conversations, feel free to join us in the comments. It's really valuable to me to be able to share thoughts and connect with others like true friends. If you feel like connecting and sharing, I'd love to hear your story. Thank you for always being here with us. Let's build something meaningful together.